Welcome back to another episode of the Construction Hall of Fame podcast. Today I am joined by Brian Hall with BCCI, and I'm really excited to drop this episode. So Brian, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on the show. And just to kind of kick things off like we always like to, would you mind giving the audience some context as to your career story about how you got from the beginning of your career to where you are today as the director of Socal markets at BCCI?
Yeah, wow, that's a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to keep it concise. I'm currently the director of Southern California markets for BCCI Construction. I'm in about 25 years of experience in the design construction industry. And, I started really, with a tool bag and framing houses and, working for developers, even 16 to 18 years old. But then I also, decided that I was going to get a bachelor's degree in business. And so, I started my career working in construction, but then started going to college for a bachelor's in business. And then while I was getting my bachelor's in business in the summers, I started working for a civil engineering company on the south side of Chicago and started to get experience with more of the design side and project management side of the construction industry. Once I graduated with a bachelor's in business, I went to work for that same civil engineering company on the south side of Chicago full time and spent about 5 years there at the start of my career. Really focused on design, specifications, supporting the engineering team there, and really starting to get a taste and a flavor of what it was to be a project manager and sort of interact with, public agencies and the public itself. From there, I actually got a job in California. So I moved from south side of Chicago to California, Northern California, at about the age of 27. And I actually moved there for another engineering position. I worked in a sort of planning project management department for an engineering company in Northern California and started to get exposed to sort of land planning, entitlements, conditional use permits, really sort of exposed to the upfront part of the design process for sort of large projects. Then along the way throughout my career, been impacted by, market conditions and the like. And so right around, this was about 2008, 2009, after I'd been there in Northern California for a couple of years and the market crashed, and decided to move down to Southern California. And the reason for that move at the time was, with the Great Recession as it was in 2008, 2009, the government started to, put a bunch of money into shovel-ready projects was kind of the term they were using. It was America Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And so I moved to Southern California in San Diego because of the military presence down there, knowing that they were going to get a bulk of that funding, and was able to get a job. At this time, though, the reality was I had graduated with a bachelor's in business. I had subsequently got a master's in business while I was working at that first position in Chicago. And here I was about 10 years into my career, and I got laid off for the first time, right? And so that was from my second job at the engineering company in Northern California. So there I was, 10 years, master's in business, and it was hard to find a job at that time. But I did make the decision to move down to Southern California because I was chasing the funding from the government. And I found what I was realizing at that time was the jobs that were out there, they were few and far between, but they were looking for project management professionals. So at that point in my career, I really was focused on project management, and all the positions that seemed to be out there in the marketplace were for project managers. And they all wanted this PMP certification through the Project Management Institute. So that's when I decided that I was going to. There I was, 10 years in a career, master's in business, wasn't able to land these jobs because they were looking for this PMP certification. So I actually went and secured a PMP certification through the Project Management Institute, and then was able to land a job again. At that point, I was working for a small solar installation company in San Diego market. And we were building projects for, the local utility companies and for Camp Pendleton for the military. So then it was with that job that I ended up getting a taste of what it was like to work on a military base and start to build projects for the Marine Corps. While on Camp Pendleton, I got exposure to a couple of other, construction companies. And then there was this company that came around. It was called BCCI Construction Services. They were actually an Alaska company, and they had what's called an 8A designation, which allows the federal government to directly sole source contract with them without having to go through the bidding process. And because they are a Alaska Native American company, they had secured a bunch of work on Camp Pendleton, but didn't have any local resources to manage the work. And so at that point, I did make the jump from the solar company as a subcontractor and worked, for general contractor, which happened to be my first taste of working for a general contractor. So I spent the next, a couple of years actually building pretty interesting projects for the Marine Corps on Camp Pendleton. We were more focused on training systems. So we were actually building different shoot houses and training courses for the Marine Corps, for their special operations training group. Really interesting, cool projects where they would do live fire training exercises, blast doors, dropping in on helicopters, that kind of stuff. So it was really a pretty cool, interesting opportunity. But then, like previous in my career, sort of the market conditions had changed. And the federal government stopped sort of funding these military type projects. And at this point, I ended up getting a call from a company called Turner and Townsend, which is a UK based company, but they focus on project management and cost management services. And they were looking for a director of project management to be stationed on the Chevron account up in Northern California. So basically moved back to Northern California from Southern California, and ended up taking a position working for Turner and Townsend and managing a group of project managers on the Chevron campus in San Ramon. That was my first taste of sort of business and real estate, right? So I took the position with Turner and Townsend, but actually worked for Seabreeze, which is Chevron Business and Real Estate Group. So spent the next couple of years on the campus there, managing projects for Turner and Townsend, for Chevron, managing a team of project managers, and really, getting really good experience with sort of corporate interiors and campus type work and sort of heavy utility type projects that I hadn't really had exposure to previous. So at this point, I was working for a civil engineering company to start, or for a second civil engineering company doing land planning and entitlements. So getting a taste of, started with design, then went into design and permitting. Then from there went into sort of a little subcontractor, heavy electrical sort of background. Then from there, my first general contractor to BCCI Construction Services and working on military type projects. And then ended up at Chevron with Turner and Townsend. And this was sort of my first taste of real estate and corporate interiors type projects and campus type work. But then again, oil goes from, 150 a barrel down to $50 a barrel. And Chevron started to really reduce the number of projects and their capital expenditures, year over year. And at that point, the first team members to go are usually the consultants. And at that point, I had been working with Swinnerton Construction. Swinnerton was another general contractor that was actually the master services agreement holder for Chevron on the campus. Got a good relationship with those folks over the couple of years that I was working with them, and they actually offered me a position. So at this point, I started my second stint with a general contractor based out of San Francisco, and worked for Swinnerton. And for those of you that are familiar with construction and general contractors, Swinnerton is one of the largest general contractors in the country and one of the oldest. I think their license number is number 92. So been around a long time, very established organization, and ended up getting a position with them as a project manager yet again. And at this point, I take the position there. I was more in their TI group, special projects group, and was basically asked to sort of head up accounts for them, right? Because they had several accounts, with Pacific Gas and Electric and Zynga, which was a big gaming company in San Francisco. And they really needed a project manager who had sort of that business background and the ability to interface with clients and sort of sell work, but also, had the project management experience to manage the work and run the teams as well. And so did that for a couple of years, did some challenging projects with Pacific Gas and Electric in downtown San Francisco, but also did some larger service station work for them as well while I was there. And then, I actually at that point in time was more interested in getting back to the sort of real estate side of our business. And so got an opportunity with JLL in San Francisco in their corporate services group, which means that when you're in their corporate services versus their markets group, corporate services is you're usually account-based. Market services is where you're actually, per project, where you're hired as a per project type individual. But I ended up getting on with the corporate services group and ended up working for MUFG Union Bank in downtown San Francisco. Was brought on as a program manager. And at this point, Union Bank, MUFG, was looking to consolidate their real estate holdings in downtown San Francisco. So they had 2 buildings in downtown San Francisco, 2 high rises, which they owned. And they sold one of them and was doing a sort of 2-year step down program to vacate, exit, and turn over space in one of the buildings to the new buyer and actually renovate and densify the other building that they had. So for multiple years with JLL on the Union Bank account as a program manager, my role was, looking at these sort of large market consolidations, putting together the scope, schedule, budgets for these things, basically building the roadmap, going through their sort of corporate approvals process to secure the funding and the appropriations necessary for these projects. And then I would, roll out these projects. So, bring on the architects, the engineers, the general contractors, and then, manage the JLL project management team as we went and did the rollout of the new projects. So from there, I actually ended up bringing on BCCI Construction as our general contractor to do sort of that initial rollout in San Francisco, that large sort of step down program. And that's how I started to build a relationship with BCCI. And that was back, 2016, I think. And really got to really know BCCI as an organization, got to work with them up close and build relationships with, the top brass at BCCI. And at some point during that, tenure at JLL, BCCI actually went from being a sort of San Francisco-based regional general contractor to merging with a larger conglomerate, right? So at the point in time, BCCI is about a $500 million a year organization. They had been working with these other organizations for a long time when they needed work done in San Francisco area. But basically they had decided to merge and sell the organization to a larger conglomerate, Global Infrastructure Solutions. And so as part of that, the mandate was that they wanted to grow the business, build the business out of San Francisco to more of a West Coast based company. And that's when, they started talking to me about an opportunity to come down into the Los Angeles market and be the director of Socal markets for BCCI, which is really looking to build and grow our market share, build, grow, and run the BCCI office and mentor and guide our teams. So that's kind of the story of, where I started and how I got to where I am. And I know I probably glossed over quite a bit in that, but be happy to answer any additional questions you might have about that.
Of course. I appreciate you sharing, diving deep. So for me, a couple questions. Actually, so I'm Polish. My family, a few generations back, immigrated into Chicago. So I've heard a lot about Chicago, been a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'm really curious. You made the transition from Chicago to California. How was that? I mean, I'm sure it was a bit warmer, but how was that transition?
Yeah, very great question. But, growing up in Chicago, growing up in the South Side suburbs, love the people, love the food, but, was looking for an opportunity to go somewhere where we didn't have as harsh of weather, right, and harsh of winters. And this was back, it's probably before your time, but this is back when, people were looking for jobs through Monster and Career Builder. And I had my resume out there at the time, and basically you could geographically select any areas that you wanted to move to. All right. So it would direct your resume towards the people in these different markets that were looking for new hires. And I selected California. I think I selected Florida and maybe, Carolina, South Carolina or something. And just so happened to get a call from a California-based company at one point, and it worked out. I'd never been to California, honestly, before I moved here. I got a phone call one day, and it was in 10 inches of snow, and they were like, "Hey, we want to fly you out next week and interview you." And this was that engineering company that I first worked for when I came to California. Flew out here, and it was funny because this is Northern California, and so if you're not familiar, Northern California in certain parts looks quite like Southern Illinois. And so I was a little surprised when I landed, but ultimately was excited about a new opportunity to live somewhere else, try something different, and move to California. And honestly, moving to Northern California from the south side of Chicago, for me at least, was kind of a pretty soft landing. They're very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and then you went back and forth between SoCal and NorCal, so you were trying to escape a harsh winter. Into NorCal, where, from my perspective, born and raised in the Bay Area, it's not exactly a harsh winter. It's a pretty nice place to be. The weather, I personally love it. But then you go to SoCal, where it almost never rains, right? So right. I think you did a great job of escaping that harsh weather, that's for sure. And what I'm curious about is along the way, like, you went from, getting affected by market conditions, and a lot of candidates are going through this right now. We're seeing a market where some companies are laying off. Some companies are getting hesitant about what the market's doing right now. So how much would you say resiliency played a part in your success throughout your career? Not getting down, not letting the moment, defeat you, but rather, like, for example, you don't have a PMP, and you go get a PMP certification, right?
That's right.
How would you say resilience has affected your success?
I would say absolutely. So, a couple of comments about that. Number one is I would never turn down an interview, right? And so even, I would say probably before I took this position at BCCI, I always had my resume out there, right? Not that I was actively looking for a job, but I had my resume out there and, did have some headhunters or some folks that were always kind of in touch about, market opportunities and things. And so I would always take an interview, even though I wasn't necessarily looking for a job. And the reason for that is, you never know what opportunity is going to come your way. And it's good to stay current on, interview technique. It's good to stay comfortable with interview. It's good to sharpen that skill. It truly is a skill, right? And I would say every interview that I've ever done, I've learned something from it, right? If anybody's gone through quite a few interviews, I'm sure you've been asked a question that you regretted answering the way that you did during that interview process. And so every time you do that, you learn from it, right? And so the best way to learn about interviewing is to interview when you have a job and you don't need to take the job, right? Because if you screw up, you're not going to be upset with yourself afterwards. You're learning something from it. So I was never shy about taking on interviews. I always would take interviews throughout my career. And the other part of this, like you mentioned, is, a lot of times it's about understanding, what it takes to be the best at what it is that you do, right? And so if you're a project manager and you want to be a project manager, well, then you should get a nationally recognized certificate in project management. If you want to be a construction manager, you should get a nationally recognized certificate in construction management. And you don't necessarily need to go to college for these things. You can go to Project Management Institute or Construction Management Institute, and you can go on their website and you can see what the criteria are to be able to sit and take these exams. And there is usually an education component, but a lot of times those things can be fulfilled without having to go to a 4-year school or get a degree.
And that persistence clearly paid off. You went from starting in the trenches to now being a director of Socal markets for BCCI. So, you're pretty much overseeing the success of an entire market in many ways, doing business development, handling talent acquisition. This is a huge role. So, cheers to your persistence. It's obviously helped you get to where you're at today. And
thank you.
I think that's just commendable in of itself. But with that said, talking about what actually attracted you to the opportunity. We talked about it a little bit, but what do you personally enjoy about working on the team at BCCI, and what attracted you there in the first place? Like, yeah, they have an opportunity, but what about BCCI made you say, okay, yeah, this is something I really want to get behind?
That's a great question. I think for me, number one, I think it was the opportunity, right? BCCI is a well-established organization. They were founded in 1986. They were still the CEO of the organization that started the company in 1986 is still with us today, Mike Scribner. And so the longevity, success, the brand recognition, all of those things sort of attracted me to the opportunity. But up until this point in my career, I had been, managing teams, at a sort of a more lower junior level with JLL and others. But this was really an opportunity to start to bring all of my background together, utilize my master's in business and be a little bit more business mindset and business focused on, really running a business organization, being a part of the leadership of an organization to build and grow something. Really, so it was the opportunity itself. It was the chance to, use and grow my skill sets. But it was also the opportunity to be a part of something from the ground floor, right, and build something to that next level.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Well, it definitely is an opportunity that I think many people would love to be in your shoes. And, hey, you earned it. So here we are. So kind of just getting into a different topic. You mentioned when we were talking initially, talking about how you just wrapped up a pretty high-profile project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project and how it's going?
Yeah, absolutely. So, being sort of newer to the Southern California market, BCCI, BCCI has done projects in Southern California for 10 plus years, but really only on a client as needed basis. We didn't sort of open our office down here until 2019 and really started to bring on team members and expand our market share and growth really almost until 2021 because of the global pandemic. But we got an opportunity and we're a little bit more opportunistic at the moment because of our newness to the market, but we got an opportunity to remodel a very awesome, cool asset, which is the Georgian Hotel in Santa Monica, on Santa Monica Boulevard, on Ocean Boulevard, right here across from the pier. It's a 1930s hotel, has a very amazing storied history. And so it's an 8-story structure, 84 rooms, between suites and standards. It's a really cool place. There's going to be a speakeasy, brand new sort of high-end lobby and restaurant. So the building itself and the project, really cool. When you're talking about a speakeasy, 2 kitchens, a brand new lobby remodel, several public restrooms that were renovated, and then 84 hotel rooms, all to very sort of high-end finish, very cool designer architecture, Art Deco style building. Been an amazing project. And so we're super excited about it. We're actually going to be up for an award in Los Angeles through the LA Business Journal, through their corporate real estate projects. So watch out for us. I'm sure if we win this award, you'll see it on LinkedIn. It's going to be, I think we're up for this award in March sometime. So nearly only 4 or 5 weeks away. And the project itself is, coming to a close here. We achieved TCO, temporary certificate of occupancy, on several floors earlier this week, and are welcoming our first guests into the building this weekend. So really excited about this project. And if anybody is anywhere close to Santa Monica, you've got to come and check this out.
I definitely been to Santa Monica a time or two. I spent some of my time in Southern California, and my brother, long story short, used to do acting. So I spent some time over there when I was going to support my brother. And long story short, what a beautiful place to do work. Not too bad to be doing some work downtown Santa Monica, building a really cool project. Cheers to being nominated for that award. We got guests checking in soon. So cheers to that. Love to see the execution on a project that was, clearly noteworthy. So love to hear it. Going into more of the tactical strategy of building out a new market, how do you approach talent acquisition when you're building out a new market?
Well, I think there's a lot of different angles to it. When you're building out an organization, right, you need to look for talent at all different levels, right? And so you're usually looking for, either folks that have the right, it's usually a combination of the right educational background and the right market experience, is usually what you're looking for, right? You're looking for people that, have some sort of degree in construction or engineering, or project management, or business maybe, like in my case. But also, a combination of field experience. What has this person been doing? And I would say I don't think there's any, set guidelines or rules. Talent comes in all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds. And sometimes it does depend on the level that you're looking for. But if you're looking for more of a higher level person that, could be a needle mover in the market, you want somebody that's got, some that's been a little bit established, right? Somebody that's got experience in doing what it is that you do, right? So if you're building tenant improvements in corporate interiors in downtown Los Angeles, well, you want somebody, whether it's a project manager, an estimator, or a superintendent that's got, experience working in those buildings in downtown Los Angeles. You also are looking for somebody who has experience or, connections in the marketplace, somebody that's, knows the architects, knows the engineers, knows the corporate real estate management firms, knows, the building managers. You're looking for somebody who's pretty well established. And that would be on the more higher end. If you're looking for, senior talent, I'd say on the lower end, you're looking for somebody that just, maybe has experience in the business, and has the confidence and the ambition and curiosity to build and grow their own experience and sort of take it to the next level. I'm always looking for people that don't just sit back and wait to be told what to do, but really are curious and ambitious and push things to the next level. If they're calling me and they're pushing their agenda, then that's usually a good thing.
Right. Very interesting. So there's I guess a discussion out there, or a debate, if you will. How important is education versus experience? Let's say you have someone who comes to you who has solid experience and solid education, and then you have someone else who has blow away experience but no formal education. Do you have a preference on who you take there?
I honestly don't. I mean, for me, it's effectiveness, right? It comes down to being effective, and is that person effective at the role, right? So for me, it doesn't really matter. It's interesting though. I typically don't see a lot of people come through without some sort of formal education. I mean, even our superintendents usually have some level of formal education. But for me personally, no, it's all about can the person get the job done? And frankly, that's one of the most important things I think in the construction industry is can the person get the job done and be successful? We have a saying, there's no perfect project, right? There's only successful projects. So if you strive for perfection, you're likely not going to be successful. But if you strive to finish the job and maintain the relationships, continue to reduce risk, and obviously stay focused on the financial outcome, those are the most important.
Mm-hmm. And like you brought up earlier, is do you have proof of track record in many types of positions that, especially as you get up to the more senior level, have you done the job? Has this person proven that they can do the job? To what extent have they proven they've done the job? What do other people say about them doing the job? And these type of things, coupled with education, obviously it sounds like for you is the full package. But at the end of the day, It's really about, can you do the job? And that's something we hear a lot. Is that pretty much a good summary right there?
It is, and I would say, sometimes there's a stigma out there about people that maybe have jumped around or job hopped. And I would say if you looked at my resume, you might accuse me of being a job hopper at one point in time. But the reality is, I think it's okay as long as the person is successful in those different positions and they've got folks that you can speak to that they worked with in those positions that would say yes, that person was successful. It's one thing for somebody to be running versus they're curious and ambitious and moving on from one to the next, right?
Like you said earlier, market conditions can hit a company. They wipe out a huge division of their entire company, right? There's a difference between job hopping and getting fired everywhere you went, or quitting everywhere you went because they were all the worst employer in the whole world, right? And telling everyone in the world how terrible everyone was that you worked with, versus, like you said, someone who's exploring. And then again, there's levels to the job hopping. I talk to a lot of talent acquisition leaders, and some people are just like, hey, if it looks like a job hopping resume, I don't even want to look at it. But some people want the story behind it. And also some people look at it at a more technical level. It's like, were they hopping jobs every 3 to 12 months, 18 months? Or was it every 2 years, 4 years, 3 years? There are just levels to these things in the way people analyze. And like you said, people have different perspectives. And sometimes you find people who job hopped for a while, then they found a company that was really their ideal opportunity, and they stay with them for years. And that's just about that company was willing to expand their net and talent acquisition to be maybe a little more open-minded to who they spoke with, to provide the opportunity that actually gave them a place in a career path where they could grow and they felt comfortable actually staying there for a longer term period. So I think there's a lot to unpack when it comes to this whole job hopper term. Now, obviously, if someone's getting fired everywhere they went, or just complaining and saying everyone was the worst everywhere they went, then I'm personally, as a recruiter, I probably won't be talking to that person. No disrespect, but they'll find a job too. I want everyone to find a great career path. But at the end of the day, I talk a lot about this, with people who I work with. So the technical piece of it's a bit fun for me to dive into.
Right,
I'm
which
curious.
is why it's important
Okay.
to maintain. It's important to maintain relationships and those references. Right, it's important to maintain that credibility, build relationships, and maintain those references. Even years after the fact, because I think that is important. Right, so if you were one of those that somebody was accusing of job hopping, but you have the story and the explanation, and they give you the opportunity to talk about it, and you have those relationships and those references to back it up, I think you can get past that.
It's so huge. Not burning bridges where you go, leaving people with a good impression, regardless of whether left for whatever the reason was. It's like making sure you don't burn that bridge, and that people later on will say good things about you. Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So for you, getting a little more tactical. So when it comes to talent acquisition in a new market, you move into a new market, you probably don't know a whole lot of people. You're not as connected as you would be in the Bay Area, for example, right? So what is your strategy to get more connected? In my head, just like prefacing, it's like you can recruit people who know people. You can lean on maybe a few contacts you know. You can lean on recruiting, like recruiters like myself, headhunters. You can rely on job boards like Indeed, LinkedIn Jobs, all these. There's tons of ways you can go about talent. Career fairs. There's a lot you can unpack here. But what is your approach, Ben?
I think it goes back to you got to know the market. You got to figure out what are the industry events that are important and pertinent to our business. You've got to go to those industry events. You've got to do a lot of handshaking and meeting people. Right? It's all about knowing the people in the market, knowing the people in the industry. Right? You've got to go to these places. You got to figure it out. You've got to do your due diligence. You got to do your background check information, and it's about getting yourself out there, being social, and introducing yourself to folks and talking to people, and remembering people's names and remembering their contact information. You can find a lot of this stuff on LinkedIn, but the reality is, you can only take LinkedIn so far. You got to get out there, boots on the ground, and meet people face to face is usually the best way to do it. And then, knowing your market. So if you're going to work in Los Angeles, for example, and you're in my industry, you need to know who are the top architects. You need to know who the top corporate real estate groups are that are managing these projects. You got to know who the top building management firms are, and Brookfield Properties, JLL, CBRE, Gensler, IA, Interior Architects. I mean, you just got to know these companies, and you've got to go out there and meet the people that work there. And through conversation, you will find out, who your competition is, who they see most often, who they like to work with, who are their top employees, because, people have these conversations with you if you build a little bit of a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Especially if you have the right approach. You're not just here to hard sell somebody, but you're here to have like a real conversation to get to know somebody, where they're at in their career, what might make them tick. And for someone who's just entering a new market, just as a side tip on top of all the things that you're saying, if you don't know the players in the market, one easy way to get to know the players in the market is spend a couple hundred or a couple grand on a tool like Construct Connect, right? Like where you can see all the people who are working on the projects, all the people who are bidding on the projects. It'll be a real quick way to cut that learning curve, and then go build relationships with the right people at the right levels to help you actually continue to expand that network. And it sounds like this is, go ahead.
Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, right? Again, it's almost, back to my example about taking on interviews and taking that practice, being social and talking about what it is that you do and what differentiates yourself and how you add value. That's all practice too, right? You just got to be able to put yourself out there and, have short-term memory. If you don't like, something about a conversation, learn from it and do it different the next time.
Right. And it brings up a point in my head. It's like, in a past life, I was doing demand gen, like lead generation campaigns for contractors, right? And I ended up working for a guy worth over $500 million with a B. And he was a really interesting guy to work with. I learned so much from him. And one thing he said that I really took away was never turn down a conversation if you think it has the chance to take your career to the next level. That was basically something he shared, is never turn down a conversation. it just can be a conversation. It could just be one exploratory conversation that you write off the list after 10 minutes. You say, I know that's not going to be for me. But at the end of the day, you can build that relationship. You can take the conversation because you never know what the person on the other end might say. You never know what a headhunter like me might say when I call you and I ask, hey, would you maybe be open to hear about something completely exploratory? Keep this discreet, right? You don't know what I might say or what someone like you might say who's building out a new market. Just like BCCI came to you with an opportunity that it sounds like really took your career to the next level. If you didn't have that open-mindedness, you might not be where you're at today, right? So I think that's just a huge takeaway for me.
Yeah, I mean, the reality was I really enjoyed the corporate real estate group, right? Being with BCCI gives me an opportunity to continue working with those corporate real estate types. But it actually, I get to work with architects, I get to work with engineers, I get to work with subcontractors, I get to build and grow my team. So I kind of get the best of all worlds. The reality is buefore this opportunity, I kind of wanted to stay in the corporate real estate group, but this opportunity itself, with the opportunity to build and grow a market and take on more of a leadership role in an organization, was what prompted me to continue and take on another job with a general contractor.
Mm-hmm. And you're playing an integral part in the development of the company, right? Like it's almost, in a way, it sounds like it can kind of be considered a startup, if you will. It's like a very well-established company, but you're breaking into a new market. There's tons of unfamiliar territory. And so one thing I'm sure you're focused on and your company's focused on is building a culture that people want to be a part of. Would you mind sharing an example of a successful strategy that you've used to help build out that thriving culture in Socal?
Yeah. So we actually seed the office with talent from Northern California, right? So when we open the doors down here, we open invitation to several of our longtime employees from Northern California that had interest in, or family in Los Angeles that had interest in moving down to this market, right? And so one of the ways that we were able to build and grow some of the culture in Southern California was to seed it from the longstanding, successful culture from Northern California, right? BCCI, 1986, been around 35 plus years, very, very positive, almost family friendly culture. And so we ended up bringing several employees that had been with the company, 5, 7, 10 years from Northern California down into Southern California. And then we do continue to utilize some of our top talent from Northern California in sort of oversight management positions, mentorship guidance of our newer talent here in Southern California from Northern California. So the company has a very sort of vested, concerted effort in, building, growing, mentoring teams, but still, building on and utilizing the talent from Northern California.
Putting into place some champions, some people who can really represent your brand message, who know what your company's all about, who have been there, and they're leaders in their own respect within the company, right? And then putting them in as a champion to help build out that company with the same type of cultural values, the same maybe look and feel, right, in terms of like what greatness looks like for your company. And again, talking about developing people. So on that line, what would you say are your best practices, or how does BCCI mentor and develop new talent in this new construction division?
Great question. I think it starts with helping them understand what the expectations are when they come on board. It's really about, this is the position, this is the role, this is the responsibility. These are your other team members that are going to be here to support you, mentor you throughout that process. But it really comes down to setting the expectation and then putting the challenge out there. If you want to get technical from a project management standpoint, it's really about monitoring and controlling at some level, right? It's about making sure that the people have the tools and the support that they need to be able to be successful, and then continuing to monitor and helping them along the way, right? We never want to put people in a position to fail, but we constantly put people in a position where they feel challenged.
Mm-hmm. I heard someone come on my podcast a while ago. His name was Brent Kelly from Corgan, which is an AEC firm. And he shared that he gives his team enough rope, I believe he said, to wander a bit, but not enough rope to hang themselves. In other words, just like you're saying, he wants to give them enough challenge to where they continue growing, but not enough challenge to where if they make a mistake, the company's at risk, right? Like there's big problems that they need to deal with. So it sounds like that's a similar practice. You have to challenge your people just enough to help them keep growing, but not too much to where it could be detrimental. Is that about right?
Yeah, and you want to make your people feel comfortable that first of all, I make myself accessible to my team. I'm always available by phone or text message if necessary. So you definitely want to make yourself available. You want to give them a comfort level that that they're free to sort of make some decisions and try some things and push the boundaries of what it is that they do on the daily. But you also want to have some sort, some oversight and management and guidance of what it is they're doing, so that they don't cause unintended harm and then regress in their position a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like to me, tell me if I'm wrong, by planting people from NorCal in your Socal division, people probably have access to senior tenured mentors who do a really phenomenal job of what they do. They're top performers in their own respect. And people in certain positions will be able to speak with, be in the trenches with, get mentorship and guidance along the way, ask questions to, have access to these people who are the picture of what greatness looks like for BCCI. They have those mentors in their life to help them get to the next level and help them learn about how they can take their career to the next level and do better at their, in their career. Is that something people have access to as well, just like they do to you?
They do, yeah. So we've got a director of project management who's been with the company well over 20 years. And she manages the project management team and even my project management team in Southern California. They have regular meetings, regular discussions, regular learning sessions. So we do continue to cross-pollinate and provide access for our junior members all the way to folks that have been with the company for 20 plus years. So absolutely, it is a little bit about organizational structure that helps to sort of drive that cross-pollination and success for sure.
And a lot of times I talk to candidates who feel like they don't have the opportunity to grow. It's like they feel like they get siloed. They're in, this big organization or a smaller organization where they have never even spoke to a C-level executive or a director-level executive. So they're like, I don't really have access to mentors. It's like any company can talk about mentorship, but do they really have access to mentors? Does your team feel like they're being mentored and they're able to push for growth? So it sounds like with your company, you give them that access. And it's huge. I mean, if you're not giving candidates a place to grow, they're just going to a place where they do the same thing every day with no hope for the future. It's a good place to find talent as a recruiter. So, it's great to hear that you're doing that. And, it's what candidates, I believe, deserve, who are doing all they can to help the company. There's at least clarity around how they can grow and mentors to help them grow. And it's what a lot of people say they want. It's like they'll take less money, especially earlier in their career, to get with the right mentors, to get with the right team who help them pursue their growth. So, yeah,
couldn't agree more. My mentor in this organization, he's the chief strategy officer for the organization. So my relationship started in BCCI with this individual, chief strategy officer, and even to this day, he's my C-suite connection for building and growing the market expansion here in Southern California. He comes down here regularly. I'd say, every other week he's in the Southern California market. So I get an opportunity, to build and grow, my career and continue to get advice and mentorship at his level. And then he also makes himself accessible to the other team members in our organization. So, yes, BCCI, in my opinion, we've got, a little bit more about organizational structure. We're a little bit more flat that way. And so, even the junior members of our team typically have access to pretty high levels in the organization.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So getting into, again, like the building out phase of getting into a new territory like you've done, what are some best practices that you leverage when it comes to identifying and securing new contract opportunities with new clientele?
Yeah. So the nice thing about the opportunity that we have here with BCCI and our growth and expansion into Los Angeles is our platform, right? And so I mentioned earlier, BCCI joined Global Infrastructure Solutions. We're actually a conglomerate. We're a family of 14 companies, and several of these organizations have been well established for since the 70s. And so, with a family of 14 companies, you have a network of organizations across the country and in certain cases outside the country. And so there's a lot of information sharing. There's a lot of clients that we have in multi-markets. And so a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but some of the work that we do, we really get exposed to it and get the opportunity through the larger platform, right? And then as far as, a newcomer to the market and trying to build and grow and secure new opportunities, again, it's pinpointing where those opportunities come from, right? So it's looking at, what is our core business, right? Are we corporate interiors? Are we structures? Are we, retail? Are we, building projects, public works type projects? So identifying your market sector, and then understanding, how those projects go through their process, right? What is their life cycle? Who's the client? Who's funding the projects? Who's a part of that sort of design and rollout and, decision team on the bid side? And so, when you're talking about corporate interiors, and you're talking about downtown Los Angeles, it's about understanding who are the large property managers? Is it Brookfield? Is it Irvine Company? Who's the property manager? Who's the corporate real estate management or project management firm that they use? JLL, CBRE, Cushman Wakefield. Who's the architects that they normally go through? And really starting to identify those teams and who are the players, and then building those relationships. You really have to be pretty strategic about your understanding of the market and how these projects come to be, right? Building relationships with the brokers. A lot of the brokers in Los Angeles been in this market for 20 plus years, right? Now they've got their go-tos, so in certain cases, you're not always going to get a lot of fruit from going to the people that have been there the longest. Sometimes you're better off starting at a more junior level and building your relationships there.
It's really reverse engineering, exactly like you said, what your market is, who the players are in the market, and then being able to figure out at what level do I need to network to be able to break into these accounts. And at the end of the day, how can you build relationships with people at the top and also build relationships with people who might not be at the top and might not be as established? Sounds like that's your best chance if you want to cast a wider net. But at the end of the day, for anyone listening, I think that was really key insight right there, going after people who might be a little more junior to build that relationship with someone who doesn't have a bunch of long-standing relationships in the market. And then I could see this unfolding to where the more you do solid work in the market, the more you build a reputation for doing great work. Maybe the people who have had long-standing relationships have a fallout or things don't go as well, and maybe they're looking for a different option from someone who has some different resources or capabilities. Then they can reach out to you based on the reputation you built by creating some raving fan clients in the market, and then it can end up coming full circle.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. So would you mind diving into some of the challenges that you faced building out this new market and how you've either overcame them or how you're working to overcome them?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges are the experience, right? So if you're trying to build projects in downtown Los Angeles, you've got to have a resume, you've got to have team members that have that experience, right? And so one of the challenges that you will have is, as a new market entrant, is, are you qualified? And, in certain cases, they want to see that, you may have built projects very similar to this in other markets in the country, but maybe you've not done it in Los Angeles. And so they want to know that you have the experience and the resume in this market, and that you understand the process, right? Understanding, and knowing the inspectors, the city's permit and approval process, certain, local codes. They want to know that you have the local experience that it takes and the local knowledge that it takes to be successful. Because if you think about it, these organizations, there's a lot of risk associated with bringing on a delivery partner, right? So as a general contractor, you are a delivery partner. They are putting their trust in you, that you can build out this project, whether it's $100,000 or, $5-10 million, that you can be successful and deliver this project per their schedule requirements and per their budget requirements. And so, one of the ways that they sort of get that assurance is that you've done it before, that you've got team members that have done it before. So it is about one of the biggest challenges is that local market knowledge and experience.
It sounds to me like.
And we overcome that with bringing on talent that's got that local market knowledge and experience, right? That's how you do it.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was about to say. I was going to say, it sounds like a blend of having those people come up from NorCal, down from NorCal, who have that experience with the company and the culture from the company, and then blending that with some strategic talent acquisition in the local Socal market, with people who know the ins and outs, people who you can bring to the table when it comes to speaking with stakeholders, who you can say, look, not only is my team BCCI quality, the execution of our work and the quality of our work at BCCI and our track record, but also, that we have some key players from the local market who we've brought onto our team who've done this day in and day out for, years, and who are really solid players in the game. And that blend, it sounds like, is really what you're striving for and what you've created.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
So going on to technology is always a fun one in construction, right? You hear a lot of people say that construction's outdated, slowest industry in adoption, et cetera, et cetera. How are some ways your team's staying ahead of the curve when it comes to, the changes and everything that's going on with the industry and technology?
Yeah. We're pretty good about staying in front of or utilizing sort of the better technologies, I would say, for project management. Always using, Procore, which is a great tool, so for organizing and managing project information and communication, with the different, stakeholders in the project. From a financial management perspective, our organization uses a financial tool called CMIC, which, if anybody's familiar with, knows can be a challenge. But the interesting thing about CMIC is it is a far superior, sort of financial management tool when you're talking about managing the finances of a project. And the nice thing about it is how it aggregates information, right? You can, in a snapshot, look at the financial health of not only a project, but you can go macro and look at the financial health of a division or a business unit. So it has that ability to go macro and really aggregate information at a high level. As far as, the field technology goes, Open Space 360 is a great tool, which helps to sort of document, 360 photo document the status of a project over time, which is an amazing tool and opportunity. If you've ever walked through an Open Space 360 project at the end and kind of seen the progression of a job, over the course of 16 weeks or a year, you get amazed at how things transform over time. So usually that's what we use. It's Procore for project management and document management and communication, CMIC for financials, Open Space 360 for field documentation and other things. And other than that, we're all on iPhones and iPads and the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, it's been really fun for me to learn more about from leaders how they're implementing technology and really how it's changing the game. And I'm really more than that. I'm excited to see how the next 5, 10, 20 years look in construction and what we're utilizing with drones, with VR. There's just so much coming. It's just going to be really making things exciting, more effective, maybe more confusing at times. Because like you said, sometimes dealing with new technology can be a bit of a challenge. It can be a little bit like, oh, I thought this was supposed to make things easier, but not necessarily right now until you actually learn it and you know how to effectively utilize the technology and integrate it within your team. Does it become like really that asset that it was meant to be? But so interesting to see what the future is going to hold.
Yeah, it's about fit for purpose. In certain cases, it depends sometimes on the size of the job or the type of job too, right? If you're talking about a 12 or 16 week build out of 10,000 square foot space, maybe the technology needs aren't as great as let's just say building out a hotel over the course of a year, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. Got it. So when it comes to your philosophy about maintaining great relationships with key stakeholders, trade partners, clients, this is probably something that's top of mind, especially as you're building out a new market. Because if you don't create raving fans, it'll be a lot easier to have a poor reputation in the local market, which I'm sure is not a goal of your companies. So what would you say are some of your best practices for actually maintaining positive relationships with the people involved in the projects that you execute?
It's consistency. So I think it starts with consistency. It's all the things that we strive to be. We want to be consistent. We want to be reliable. We want to maintain relationships, right? So I think one of the takeaways that I've had over the course of my 25-year career is building and maintaining relationships, right? Younger in my career, I think it's easy to say, oh, I don't have time for that. I'm focused on the delivery and I need to build this schedule or I need to do this or do that. And we, build a project and then we don't talk to those people that we just spent the last 10 or 12 weeks or 16 weeks with, could be ever again. Right. And so for me, I would say, it's maintaining that relationship. Right. And, whether it's every 6 months or, once a year, look through your contact list and, put in a call or send an email or send a card, build that relationship and maintain it. And then, be consistent in, who you are, as you talk to these people. Construction can be an emotional business. There's highs and there's lows, but try to stay somewhere in the middle and be moderate. I like to say, there's not a lot of room for emotion in business, at least in my opinion. I get it. It's easy to be emotional because it can be tough from time to time, but it doesn't really bring value to the situation if you allow yourself to succumb to the emotions that you might feel in any given situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, as you unpack this answer, it just sounds like business in general, like a business 101. How do you perform in any business sector? I've done a little bit of work in technology. I've done work selling windows and doors and home improvement, exterior renovation for my dad's company. It seems like across the board, these are things that apply, especially as a recruiter. What people want to know you is the inconsistent recruiter, the one who doesn't react well when things don't go well. Like, that's definitely not the reputation you want as a recruiter as well. So just really in anything I've done, these seem like things across the board that are going to be really applicable when really building out a new business. So it sounds like your team has these on the forefront. And if you didn't, it would be a lot harder to build out this Socal market.
Very true.
Yeah. So wrapping things up here, this is a question I always like to ask because I believe in helping this industry progress forward and helping make the industry a better place. And this industry is made up of people. It's a human business, right? So what advice would you give to a younger construction professional who would aspire to be in your shoes one day?
Well, I would say, challenge yourself. Don't get too comfortable. Definitely want to challenge yourself. Be curious. Try to learn as much as you can. For me, I would say one of the biggest reasons for my success is I consider myself to be well-rounded. Right, I have managed construction projects from basically every seat at the table. I've been on the design side. I've been on the subcontract side. I've been on the general contractor side. I've been on the corporate real estate side and the project management and the program management side. So really, be curious, challenge yourself, and don't be afraid to, take some chances. Try to be calculated in your chances, but don't be afraid to make a mistake. Right? We all make mistakes. We're human. That's part of who we are. But if you have a good team around you, and you try to be consistent, and most people will recognize that you made that mistake, perhaps learning, growing, and trying. Right. So for me, my advice is to challenge yourself, push yourself, and think about the next project or the next job opportunity. One of the things I would say about this business is it's not usually the current project is important, clearly, because you want financial success and you want project success. But if you think about the next job and you think about your client and wanting to build that relationship and build their next project, well, inherently you will be focused on success for this particular project if you're focused on a long-term relationship and building the next one.
Stay curious, build relationships, maintain relationships. Don't be afraid to fail. It's pretty cool how when I have people on the show, I start to hear trends. I hear trends by how people answer questions, the advice they give, and they give it in different nuanced ways. So someone might hear the same advice, I guess, if you speak in a general sense, but they hear from a different perspective, and that helps them have a whole new view on how their career could unfold by implementing some of this. And so I just want to say thank you for sharing your insights. And I'm sure if this just impacts one person, then we did our job. So I appreciate you sharing.
Thank you, Matt.
And then really to cap things off, I just want to know, thank you. And I just want to know, what are your future plans? What is your team looking to highlight? Do you have any exciting projects coming up you want to talk about? What does that look like?
Well, my plan is, build the business, grow the business. We're focused. It's interesting when you're running a division. It's a year over year focus, right? And so it's constantly looking to build the revenue pipeline, hit your revenue goals for that year. Along with those revenue goals, you got to build and grow and maintain the resources and the team around you. And then, you've got to focus on sustained success, which is delivering successful programs and projects. And so for us, that's kind of what we look at year over year. As far as a long-term goal for the BCCI organization, we want to be every bit as big in Southern California as we are in Northern California, right? So before we opened our Southern California division, we were $500 million a year in revenue and 300 plus employees in Northern California. So that's exactly our goal in Southern California. We want to exceed that, right? And we think we can in, 5 years or less. That's the plan.
Okay. Love the ambitious goal. There's lots of market share out there to grab. We've got a solid team working at it and pecking away at it every day. So
thank you.
Cheers. Hey, Brian, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a pleasure to have you. I appreciate all your insights that you share. And like I said, if we just help one person with this podcast, then we did our job. So
thanks, Matt. Really appreciate you having me today.